Jack arrives at the cabin on a Friday afternoon. The nearest village, Post Bridge, is several miles away, ensuring complete solitude. As night falls, the isolation of Dartmoor becomes palpable. Jack lights a fire and settles in with a book. Around midnight, Jack hears a faint knock at the door. He opens it to find no one there. Shrugging it off as the wind, he returns to his book. Moments later, the knock comes again, louder this time. He steps outside, but there's no sign of anyone. Jack tries to sleep, but is woken by the sound of footsteps on the porch. He grabs his flashlight and cautiously opens the door. The footsteps stop, but the door of the old shed nearby swings open on its own. Jack feels a chill run down his spine. He decides to investigate the shed. Inside, he finds old tools and a dusty, weathered journal. As he flips through it, he reads about a man who lived in the cabin years ago and vanished without a trace. The last entry mentions hearing footsteps and knocks, just like Jack did. Terrified, Jack runs back to the cabin and locks himself in. The knocking continues, growing more frantic. He calls the local authorities, but by the time they arrive, the knocking has stopped. The next morning, Jack leaves Dartmoor, vowing never to return. The journal is now in the hands of the local historical society, which confirms the man's disappearance remains unsolved to this day. Emma settles into the living room, a cup of tea in hand, and begins watching her favorite horror series. The old building creaks with every gust of wind, but she's used to it. As the night wears on, she decides to head to bed. That's when she hears it. A faint whisper, almost indistinguishable from the wind. Thinking it's just her imagination, she brushes it off and climbs into bed. As she drifts off to sleep, she hears the whisper again, this time clearer and closer. It sounds like a child's voice, softly calling her name. Emma. Emma. She sits up, heart pounding, and listens. The whisper stops. Emma decides to check the flat. She walks through the dark, narrow hallways, her phone's flashlight guiding her way. Every creak and groan of the old building seems amplified. She checks each room, but they're all empty. As she returns to her room, she notices something odd. A small handprint on her bedroom mirror. It's too small to be her own. Panic sets in, and Emma calls her friend, Lily, who lives nearby. As she waits for Lily to arrive, the whispering returns, now more insistent and coming from different directions. Emma, come play with us. She grabs a kitchen knife and locks herself in the bathroom. Lily arrives and finds Emma huddled in the bathroom. Together, they search the flat, but find no one. However, the handprint on the mirror remains. They decide to stay at Lily's place for the night. The next day, Emma learns from her landlord that a family once lived in her flat, and their young daughter disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Some say her spirit still roams the building, searching for someone to play with. Sarah manages to get permission for a solo tour from a friend who works as a guide. Armed with a flashlight and a camera, she descends into the dark, claustrophobic passages of Mary King's Close. The air is thick with the smell of damp and decay. As she explores, she hears faint whispers echoing through the stone corridors. Thinking it's just the acoustics, she presses on. She reaches a room known as Annie's room, where a young girl is said to haunt. The temperature drops suddenly, and her flashlight flickers. Sarah starts to feel uneasy. She hears footsteps behind her, but when she turns around, there's no one there. She takes a few photos and decides to leave, but the door she came through won't open. Panic sets in as she realizes she's trapped. The whispers grow louder, turning into cries and screams of agony. Sarah tries to find another way out, but ends up in a dead-end room. She feels a cold hand brush against her cheek and drops her flashlight in fright. In the darkness, she sees shadowy figures moving towards her. Just when she thinks all is lost, the door bursts open and her friend pulls her out. Sarah is visibly shaken and insists on leaving immediately. Later, when she develops the photos, she finds eerie images of shadowy figures and orbs of light surrounding her in Annie's room. She learns that many others have experienced similar hauntings in Mary King's Close, and the spirits of plague victims are believed to still roam the underground streets, seeking solace from their eternal suffering.